The first time she sang it, she did not mean for him to hear it. And the second time she sang it, she did not mean for him to be awake. But he was awake both times. And he had not, in 5 years, been awake at 3 in the morning without listening. And the sound of a Korean lullaby in a black nurse's voice at the foot of his iku bed was the kind of sound a man who had been listening for 5 years did not, even in the worst of his pain, fail to register. Ezra Okafor did not know, on the first night, that the man in bed 7 was awake. She had finished her rounds at 2:46. She had checked his IV, adjusted the pump that was metering his pain medication at a level she suspected was lower than what he needed, because the patient had refused, on intake, to sign for the higher dose. She had read his chart for the 3rd time that shift. The chart was thin. The chart contained a name, Kim Doe, which was not the name he had been admitted under, because he had been admitted as a John Doe with 3 gunshot wounds, and the name on the chart was the placeholder her charge nurse had typed in at 4:18 yesterday afternoon, when his identification had been confirmed by a man in a black suit who had arrived at the hospital with a card that bore the seal of the Korean consulate. The card had not been a consular card. The charge nurse had logged it as one anyway, because the charge nurse had been a charge nurse on this floor for 11 years, and the charge nurse knew which paperwork to file and which paperwork to misfile. And the man in bed 7, after a 5-minute conversation in the corridor outside his room, had been moved to a private bay at the end of the hall, and his chart had been redacted by someone in administration who Ezra had never met. She had been told, by her charge nurse, in the small private voice nurses used when they were telling other nurses how to survive a patient, "He is here. He is not here. Treat him perfectly. Do not write anything down beyond what the protocol requires. Do not ask him questions. If a man comes to the door, do not let the man in unless he gives you a name, and the name will be Hyung-sok. Anyone else, page me." Ezra had nodded. She had done all of these things for the 7 hours she had been on her shift. She had not, in those 7 hours, looked at the man's face in the way a nurse looked at a face when she was trying to memorize it. She had been a night nurse on the trauma floor of this hospital for 12 years. And 12 years was long enough to teach a person not to look at faces too closely. When the chart said John Doe and the door had a guard outside it, and the man in bed 7 was the 3rd man this year whose identification had been finalized by a card from a consulate that was not a consulate. She did not look at his face on the first night. She sang the lullaby anyway. She sang it under her breath. She sang it because she sang it every night, in the small, slow rounds between 2 and 4 in the morning, when the hallway was quiet enough that her voice did not carry, and the other nurses were charting at the station, and the patients who were going to sleep were already asleep, and the patients who were not going to sleep were too tired to register a nurse's humming. She had been singing it for 12 years. She did not always sing it in Korean. Some nights she sang it in English. Some nights she sang it in Yoruba, in the version her grandmother had sung to her in Lagos when she was 4. The Korean version she sang on the nights when she had been thinking about something specific. And on this particular Tuesday night in November, she had been thinking about something specific. And the Korean version was the version that had come out. She did not see him open his eyes. She had her back to him. She was adjusting the saline line. She sang the 4 lines she always sang. The first verse of Jajanga, the cradle song her ex-husband had taught her in 2011 when they had been newly married and she had been pregnant with the daughter who had not, in the end, lived past the 2nd trimester, and she did not turn around when she finished, because there was nothing to turn around for. There was a patient in the bed. The patient was unconscious. The lullaby was not for him. The lullaby was for her, and for the daughter who had not been born, and for the small private quiet she had been carrying for 14 years that no one in this hospital, including her ex-husband when they had still been married, had ever asked her about. She left the room at 2:58. She did not know, walking back to the nurse's station, that the man in bed 7 had been awake the entire time, and that his pulse, which her monitor at the station had been displaying at a steady 81 beats per minute, had risen to 94 during the second line of the song, and had not, by 3:11, come down. The man in bed 7 was Kong Junho. He was 37 years old. He ran the western branch of an organization his father had built, and his older brother had been killed inheriting. And he had, 3 nights earlier, been shot 3 times in the parking garage of a building on Wabash by a man who had once been the head of his personal security. The man who had shot him had not survived the encounter. Junho had survived because a delivery driver who had been picking up takeout from the restaurant on the ground floor of the building had heard the shots and had not, in the moment, made the smart decision to leave the garage. The delivery driver had instead used his hoodie to compress the chest wound and had called 911 from the dying man's phone and had not stopped applying pressure even after the paramedics had arrived. The delivery driver had given a statement to the police and had been allowed to go home. The delivery driver had received, by courier, on the following morning, a payment that would clear his student loans, his mother's mortgage, and his sister's outstanding hospital bills, with no return address and no note. Junho had been unconscious through the surgery. He had been unconscious for the first 31 hours of his recovery. He had woken, briefly, at 4:12 the previous afternoon, long enough for his head of security to confirm that he was alive and to make the arrangements that had moved him to the private bay at the end of the hall. He had gone back under. He had been drifting in and out since, in the half-conscious twilight that his low-dose pain medication had been engineered to produce, because Junho had specifically requested, in his 5-minute window of clarity, that the dose be kept low enough for him to stay aware of what was happening in the room around him. He had not slept properly, through the night, without medication, in a way that produced rest rather than the simulation of it, since 2020. He had not slept properly since the night his older brother had died in a hospital room in Seoul that had looked, from his memory of the half-hour he had been allowed inside it, very much like the room he was lying in now. He had been 28 years old that night. His brother had been 32. The 4 men who had come through the front door of that hospital had not been people his family had expected, and his brother's bodyguard had killed 3 of them, and his brother had killed the 4th from his hospital bed, with a small pistol he had kept under his pillow that no one in the family had known about. And his brother had died anyway, at 3:17 in the morning, with Junho holding his right hand, and his mother holding his left, and his father standing at the foot of the bed not crying, because his father did not cry. And the lullaby Junho's mother had sung to his brother in the last 7 minutes of his life was Jejonga, in the same melody, and the same first verse, and the same soft voice that had just, in a room in Chicago at 2:46 in the morning 5 years and 7 months later, come out of the mouth of a black nurse he had not yet, until that moment, looked at. He had opened his eyes during the second line. He had not moved. He had not made a sound. He had listened to the rest of the verse, and to the small silence after it, and to the soft sound of the Soline pump being adjusted, and to the soft sound of the nurse's shoes leaving the room. And then he had closed his eyes again, and he had lain in the half-dark of the room with the monitors ticking around him, and he had done a thing he had not done in 5 years. He had cried. He had cried very quietly. He had cried in the way a man cried when he had been the second son, and was now the only son, and had been the only son for 5 years, and had been holding a particular sound in his chest for 5 years, without anyone in his life ever singing it back to him. He had cried for the length of approximately 4 minutes. He had stopped. He had wiped his face with the back of his right hand, which was the hand without the IV, and he had lain in the dark for the remaining 3 hours of his nurse's shift. And he had not slept, but he had rested. In a way, he had not rested in 5 years, and at 6 o'clock, when his nurse came back into the room to check his pump one more time before her shift ended, he was still awake, and this time he turned his head, and he looked at her. If you have ever sung a song to no one in particular, in a room you did not know was being listened in, drop your city in the comments tonight and let me know you're here. Subscribe. Hit the like button if you have ever carried a private song for someone you lost. Stay with me, because in the next 30 hours, what passes between a night nurse and a patient who has not slept in 5 years is going to become the only thing either of them has, and the song neither of them has been able to put down is going to become the song that lets them, finally, set the rest of it down together. She looked at him. It was the first time she had looked at his face directly since intake. She had been told not to. And she had been a nurse for long enough that she did not have to be told twice. But the man in bed 7 was awake and looking at her, and looking at a patient who was looking at you was not optional. And she met his eyes in the way she had been trained to meet a patient's eyes, for the count of 2, with the small, steady attention of a clinician who was assessing alertness and orientation and pain. And what she saw in his face was not what she had expected. She had expected pain. She had expected the controlled mask of a man who had decided not to show how much he was hurting. She had expected the dilated pupils of someone who had been on the edge of consciousness for 36 hours. What she saw was a face that had been crying. His pupils were the pupils of a man who was perfectly aware of where he was. His eyes were red at the rims. The skin under his eyes was the wet, specific shine of skin that had been wiped by a hand and not by a tissue. He had been crying, and he had stopped, and he was looking at her now with the steady attention of a man who had been waiting for her to come back into the room. She did not comment. "Good morning, Mr. Kim," she said. The fake name, the placeholder. She used it because she had been told to. "I'm Ezra. I've been your nurse since 11 last night. I'm just going to check your pump one more time before I sign off. How is your pain on a scale of 1 to 10? He did not answer right away. 6, he said, in English. Without an accent of the kind she had expected. 6 is higher than I wanted. I can adjust your medication up 0.5 milligram and you will be at a 3 within 10 minutes. Do you want me to do that? No, you want to stay at 6. Yes, all right. She did not argue with him. Arguing with a patient about their pain was a thing she had stopped doing in year 3, because patients had their reasons, and her job was to inform them of options and respect their decisions, not to talk them into the option she would have chosen for herself. She checked the pump. She read the numbers off the monitor and noted them in the chart. She did all of this without looking at his face again, because she did not want to crowd him with attention he had not asked for. She was about to leave the room when he spoke. "Where did you learn it?" She stopped. She did not turn around immediately. She kept her hand on the doorframe. She looked, for 1 second, at the wall, while she decided how to answer the question. There were several true answers. The shortest true answer was from my ex-husband. The longest true answer was a thing she had not, in 14 years, said out loud to anyone. She turned around. "Sir." The song. "Sir, I am not asking as your patient. I am asking as a person who heard a thing in the middle of the night that I have not heard in 5 years and 7 months. And I would like, if you are willing to tell me, to know where you learned it. You do not have to tell me. You can leave the room and end your shift and never come back to this floor again, and I will respect that. But I am asking." She looked at him. She thought about it for the count of 3. She closed the door behind her. She walked back to the foot of the bed. She did not sit. She stood at a careful distance. The distance a nurse stood from a patient when she was about to tell the patient a thing that was not on the chart, and she said, in the quiet voice that the room asked for at 6 in the morning, I learned it from a man I was married to between 2011 and 2014. His name was June. He was a graduate student in mathematics at the University of Chicago. We met in a coffee shop on Hyde Park Boulevard. We were married for 2 years and 11 months. We are no longer married. He taught me the song in the 2nd year of our marriage, when I was pregnant with our daughter. Our daughter did not live past the 2nd trimester. After we lost her, the song was a thing I kept singing, and June was a thing I did not keep, and the marriage ended in 2014, and I have been singing the song every November since. I do not sing it in front of patients ordinarily. Last night I sang it under my breath because I thought you were unconscious. If it disturbed you, I am sorry. It will not happen again. He looked at her for a long moment. It did not disturb me, Miss Okafor, Ezra Okafor, Miss Okafor. It did not disturb me. It is the song my mother sang to my older brother on the night he died. It is the song I have not heard sung by another human being since that night. I have not slept through a night, without medication, since that night. I am telling you this not because I am asking for a thing. I am telling you because you have just told me a private thing, and I am giving you a private thing in return, and the exchange is the exchange. We are even. You owe me nothing. I owe you nothing. Will you sing it again? She did not understand the question at first. Sir, will you sing it again? Not now. I am not asking now. I am asking if you are working tomorrow night, and if your rounds bring you into this room at 2 in the morning, and if you would have sung it anyway under your breath the way you sang it last night, will you let yourself sing it? Knowing that I will be awake. Knowing that I will be listening. I will not look at you. I will not speak to you while you are singing. I will not, after you have sung it, ask you anything else about it. The song will be the song. I am asking your permission to be in the room when you sing it, because the room is technically yours during your rounds, and I do not want to take a thing from you that you have been singing privately for 14 years. I am asking, Miss Okafor. The answer can be no. She stood at the foot of his bed for a long time. She thought about her daughter. She thought about June, who had moved to Seoul in 2015 and had not, in 11 years, been in contact. She thought about the 8 years of singing the song into empty rooms at 3 in the morning to no one. She thought about the man in bed 7, who had not, in 5 years and 7 months, been sung to in the only language his grief was held in. I am working tomorrow night, she said. Yes, my rounds bring me into this room at 2. Yes, I will sing it. He did not smile. He did not say thank you. He closed his eyes, slowly, the way a man closed his eyes when he was setting a thing down that he had been holding for a long time. And his pulse. She watched the monitor as she said the words, came down from 86 to 73 over the course of the next 4 breaths. She walked out. She did not write the conversation in his chart. She finished her shift. She drove home. She slept for 6 hours in her 1-bedroom apartment on the south side, and she woke up at 3 in the afternoon. And she lay in bed for another 40 minutes looking at the ceiling, and she did not, in those 40 minutes, think about much of anything. She thought about the song. She thought about a man whose face she had not, until that morning, looked at, and whose eyes had been red at the rims, and whose answer to her about why he had wanted her to sing it had not been the answer of a man who wanted anything from her except the song. She got up. She went to work. She sang it the next night at 2:04 in the morning. He was awake. He did not look at her. She did not look at him. She sang the 4 lines. She sang them slowly, the way she would have sung them to her daughter if her daughter had lived, and she heard him breathe through the second line in a way that suggested he was not breathing the way he had been breathing in the first line, and she did not stop. She sang the verse to the end. She adjusted the pump. She left the room. She came back at 3:18 for the next round. He was asleep. She stood at the foot of his bed for a moment. She had not, in 12 years of night shifts on this floor, watched a patient sleep the way he was sleeping. It was not the half-sleep of medication. It was the deep, specific sleep of a person whose body had finally agreed to go where it had been refusing to go, and his face, which she allowed herself to look at, because he was asleep and would not see her looking, was the face of a man who had set down something he had been carrying for 5 years and 7 months. She did not wake him. She came back at 4:40. He was still asleep. She came back at 6. He was still asleep. He did not wake until 7:11, 4 minutes after her shift had ended and the day shift nurse had come on. And the day shift nurse, who Ezra had briefed in the corridor, did not disturb him. He slept for the first 6 full consecutive hours he had slept since 2020. She did not see him again on her next 2 shifts. She had been moved to a different rotation. She did not know whether the move was a coincidence or whether it had been arranged by someone, and she did not ask. She sang the song under her breath on those 2 shifts in the rooms of patients who did not hear it, and she went home. And she slept, and she did not think about the man in bed 7 more than she could help thinking about him, which was more than she would have preferred. On the morning of her 4th shift after that night, 8 days after she had sung the song the second time, she came into the locker room at 10:45 at night. And there was a small envelope in her locker. It had been placed inside while she was off shift. The envelope had no name on it. She opened it. Inside was a key card to a private wing of the hospital she had not, in 12 years, been authorized to enter. There was also a single piece of paper, folded once, with 2 sentences in a steady, careful handwriting. The patient from bed 7 is being discharged on Friday. He would like, before he leaves, to ask you one question. The key card will get you to the private wing between 3 and 4 in the morning on Wednesday or Thursday. You do not have to come. If you do not come, no one will look for you. H. She held the card in her hand for a long time. She did not, in the moment, decide whether she was going. She put the card in her wallet. She put the note back in the envelope. She put the envelope in her locker. She went to her shift. She decided on Wednesday at 2:41 in the morning that she was going. She used the card at 3:12. The card worked. The doors opened. The corridor she walked down was empty of staff, and the door at the end of it was open. And the room beyond the door was a single private suite, with a view of the lake, and a man in a soft gray sweater sitting in a chair by the window, not in a hospital bed, drinking tea, looking at her. Miss Okafor. Mr. Kang. Junho, thank you for coming. She did not sit. He did not ask her to. He stood up, slowly, with the careful slowness of a man who was 8 days out from 3 gunshot wounds, and he bowed, a small bow, the kind that came from a man who had been raised to bow correctly, and he said the thing he had asked her here to ask. Miss Okafor, I am being discharged on Friday morning. I will be flying to Seoul on Saturday. I will be in Seoul for approximately 3 months while I finish recovering and while certain matters in my life are reorganized. After that, I will be returning to Chicago. when I return, I would like to take you to dinner. I am not asking for an answer tonight. I am not asking you to commit to anything. I am asking only whether, when I am back in this city in February or March, and when you are no longer my nurse in any sense that matters, I may ask you again. If the answer is no now, the answer will be no later, and I will respect it, and I will not contact you. And the song will be the song, and we will be even, the way I said we were on the first morning. If the answer is not yet, the answer is not yet, and I will ask again in March. If the answer is yes, that I may ask in March, then I will ask in March, and you can decide then what your answer to the dinner is. That is all I am asking tonight. I am asking only for the possibility. She looked at him. She thought about her daughter, who had not lived. She thought about June, who had taught her the song, and had not, in the end, been able to stay. She thought about the 8 years of singing into rooms that were not listening. She thought about the man in front of her, who had not slept in 5 years and had slept for 6 hours after she had sung, and who was asking her carefully, with both hands, on purpose, for the possibility of asking her something else in March. Junho, yes, you may ask me in March. He closed his eyes for the count of 1. He opened them. He bowed again, a deeper bow this time, and he said, "Thank you, Miss Okafor. Ezra, goodbye, Junho, goodbye, Ezra. I will see you in March." She walked out. She walked down the corridor and through the doors, and back to her floor, and she finished her shift. And she went home, and she slept for 10 hours. And she did not dream about her daughter for the first time in 14 years, which was a thing she had not known she had been doing every night until the night she did not do it. In March, on a Thursday afternoon, she was paged at the nurse's station for a flower delivery. The flowers were not roses. The flowers were white chrysanthemums. The flower a Korean man brought to a woman whose grief he had decided to honor, not to overwrite. There was a card. The card had a phone number and one sentence. "I am back in Chicago. May I ask now?" She called the number that evening. He answered on the second ring. "Junho, Ezra, you may ask now," he asked. The dinner was a small Korean place in Lincoln Square that had been owned by the same family for 31 years. They sat across from each other for 3 hours. He told her about his brother. She told him about her daughter. They did not, at the end of the dinner, decide anything other than that they would have dinner again in 2 weeks. They had dinner again in 2 weeks. They had dinner again in 2 weeks after that. By the following November, 1 year and 1 week from the night she had sung Jajanga into a room she had thought was empty, they were taking a walk along the lake on a cold morning, and he stopped at a bench, and he sat down, and he asked her to sit beside him, and he said the sentence he had been carrying since the morning he had first opened his eyes during the second line of the song. "Ezra, I would like, if you will allow it, to spend the rest of my life listening to you sing it. Not because I cannot sleep without it. I can. I have learned this year that I can. But because the song is yours, and you are mine, and I would like, for the rest of whatever time is given to us, to be the person you sing it to. Will you let me?" She looked at him. She thought about her daughter. She thought about June. She thought about the 8 years of singing into empty rooms. She thought about the man on the bench beside her, whose pulse she had once watched drop on a monitor while she sang. "Yes, Junho. Yes, I will let you." She sang it to him that night. She sang it to him every night for the rest of their lives, on the nights when the song wanted to be sung, and on the nights when it did not want to be sung she did not sing it. And Jono, who had spent 5 years and 7 months not sleeping, slept beside the woman who had sung the song into a room she had thought was empty. And he slept. And he kept sleeping. And the song was the song. And they were even, the way he had said they were on the first morning. And the evenness had become, slowly, on purpose, a marriage.